This is recording at 24 millimeters. Now this is at 70 millimeters, full frame. So if you ever want to go into selfie mode, you just 1, 2, 3, and it rotates right around. So what do films like Elysium, Fantastic Mr. Fox, even the Avengers, or TV shows like House have in common? Well, they use small, compact DSLR and mirrorless cameras to help film the production. I'm going to show you how for under 5,000 or 10,000 bucks, you can get cinema grade picture and have something that's not only inexpensive but compact and easy enough to use that you could do it by yourself. So stick around, it's going to be a long one, but I'm going to go over cameras, equipment, and some things you should probably know if you're going to be spending money on used or new equipment. So anyways, welcome to WhyBuy, and let's jump in. Action. Straight shot, coming in low to the ground. Polarized. Oh wow, glare be gone. Very nice. Okay, time to see how this performs in low light.
And thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen.
Yes, you can buy a ton of great camera gear if you have the budget, but how do you keep things manageable so that you could grow a small business, or if you just wanted to create cinematic videos as a hobby and as a pastime, how do you avoid spending a fortune? I think a common misconception when it comes to buying camera equipment or upgrading it, you want to just buy the best and future-proof your decision so that from now and years from now, it's going to be relevant and good equipment. But you don't need to overspend to get really good results that are sort of evergreen, you know, equipment you can use for a very long time. But I know it can be frustrating and there's just so much to learn. Usually you just end up quitting and not buying anything anyway. So what I'd like to do is just share practical experience with you of how I've used this equipment in the field and the things that I really care about and what mattered in the moment. I do a lot of running and gunning, documentary series, and a lot of the times I'm just looking for something very high quality and that it just works. It's reliable and dependable. So the way I kind of broke this up is into two budgets, because I think if you're getting into cinematic storytelling, you should budget around $5,000 or $10,000 depending on the results you want to achieve. If you want to go lower than that, I'll explain how, so stick around in terms of buying used camera equipment. But let's kick things off with some of the accessory gear that can help you out. Full transparency, you're going to see a lot of expensive equipment and gear in this video, and you're probably wondering, well, you have it all, so what do you care about? The truth is, this wouldn't be possible without our sponsor, McBain Camera. They were kind enough to supply me with pretty much everything I asked for from their stores. Now, I've been a customer of theirs for a really long time. I bought all my equipment from them, and if you're ever looking to buy this equipment, whether it's Sony, Canon, Fuji, or, I mean, they're a huge distributor for videography and camera equipment, so check them out, and again, huge thanks to them for making this episode possible. So the camera equipment that I chose for this video is going to be kind of a mixed bag. You're going to see some industry-leading mirrorless cameras, some lenses, some supporting equipment, and even some entry-level gear like GoPros and iPhones that really help complete a full kit that you would need in the field. Now, I'll do a little bit of explanation for some of the technology, but it's really just for context. I'm not a camera gearhead that can dive into all these details, so I'm just going to be looking at this from the perspective of someone who uses the equipment in the field, and if I do provide some explanation, it's just for context so that you can follow along. Action! I realize a lot of these cameras have come out years apart from one another, but I just want to illustrate the point that you could buy used equipment, and even though it's older, the quality might still be good enough, if not really good, to use in your video making today and save you a lot of money. So that you can clearly understand what is being shown to you on video, I'm going to put a marker in the corner of the screen so that you can see what camera was being used or what lens was being used. Was it color graded? Was it not? So keep an eye out for that so that you can get an idea as to where did that video clip come from. So let's talk about lenses. Now, lenses are a big part of cinematic storytelling. Probably just as important as the camera you're using to record the footage with. For video specifically, the lenses I want to highlight are the RF 24-70 f2.8, the RF 70-200 f2.8, the RFS 18-150, and it has a range f3.5 to f6.3. And lastly, the older EF 70-200 Mark III f2.8 and the EFS 17-55mm f2.8. Now, one of the biggest things you'll notice right up front with lenses is the price. You might look at something that has the same zoom range, but it might cost $1,000 more or $2,000 more, and you wonder, well, it has the same ability to zoom, why does it cost so much more, or why is it so much bigger? Well, this has a lot to deal with the competency of the lens to capture light. In short, that f2.8, what that number is basically saying is the amount of light the lens can let in. Why does this even matter? Well, light is what provides the information to the sensor in the camera. So the more light that a lens can capture, the better it can perform in pretty much all lighting conditions, and especially low light conditions. This f-stop, or the aperture of the lens, is not necessarily consistent with zoom lenses. It's very hard, for just technology speaking, for a lens to have a consistent aperture all throughout. That's why a lot of people buy prime lenses. You can't zoom them, but the image clarity and the sharpness is outstanding. A lot of photographers prefer using prime lenses because they just look incredible, especially for fine detail and textures. They just look amazing. In my experience, zoom lenses are the way to go for videography because the amount of dynamic situations you're going to find yourself in, you're going to wish you had a zoom lens so that you don't have to take 10 steps back or 15 steps forward. You're constantly crouching, moving around. It's just a lot easier with a high quality zoom lens. To keep things simple, as I'm referring to them, you should know the older lens technology system that Canon has is EF. The newer is RF. So whenever you hear EF lenses, those are the previous generation, and RF are the newest generation. Now, not to add more confusion to it, but RFS are for crop sensor cameras. EFS are for crop sensor cameras. So whenever you hear that S at the end, that means that lens is for crop sensors. If you don't know what that is, I'll get to in a minute when we get to the cameras. All you need to know for right now with crop sensor lenses is that they're a more inexpensive way to get a versatile lens for videography or photography. Let's take a look at the actual aperture size, or how much light is being let in. Look at the amount of glass in that. And this is the RF, f2.8. There's a huge amount of difference of information that these lenses can capture. And they're both relatively the same zoom range, except this costs $600 and this costs over $3,000. Filming at 70mm, f2.8. Now let's zoom in a bit. Line this up a bit better. There we go. So Rolleiflex, R8 in the back, Canon 80D, the WhyBuy hat in the background. It's having a little bit of hard time going right to the edge. We're gonna try it with this little guy. So let's go 70. Oh man, that's punched in quite a bit. 80D, R8, WhyBuy hat, back to the Rolleiflex. Now let's go 150 because can't quite get 200, but look at that with the crop, pretty much there. It still performs quite well. Now, the important thing to consider if you're already thinking, oh, well, I'll just buy a crop sensor lens or an RFS lens, you have to consider the performance in the long term. These lenses are inexpensive and can come in handy in unique situations, but if you're looking to invest for the long term, you should consider getting full frame lenses. The nice thing is, let's say you bought a crop sensor camera, you can still use a full frame lens on there. So let's say, for example, you couldn't afford the RF 70-200. Well, you could just buy an EF 70-200, which has the same aperture of f2.8. And in a lot of ways, I think this is almost better because unlike this lens, which protrudes when you zoom, this lens, all the mechanisms are inside internal, so it's much harder for dust and mud and rain, anything to get in here. In a lot of ways, I still think this is the better field lens, and instead of over $3,000, this you could probably find used, a Mark II or a Mark I, for probably $1,500 or $2,000. The only issue you're going to run into is that EF lenses don't mount to RF camera bodies, but you can get an adapter. I'm going to put that on, match the red lines, not dots. Red dot. And there you go. Got an EF lens on an R body. And now you just saved yourself $1,000. But you're probably asking yourself, is there a compromise in quality with the EF compared to the RF? I'll just show you. So taking this R7, this is the EF. And I got this little birdhouse here. I'm going to switch my stabilizer on. So here's the EF at 70 millimeters. I'll zoom it in at 200 millimeters. Now let's swap to the new RF lens and compare the images. At 70 millimeters, I'm going to punch in to 200 millimeters. I don't know, they look pretty close. And to save yourself $1,000, yeah, the EF and an adapter plate might be worth it. The 70-200 EF f2.8 is probably one of my favorite lenses of all time, and I've actually never bought one. When you think about buying these brand new, it's a hefty price tag to put in your camera bag, and truth is, I've always just rented them from McBain Camera because it's a lot of money to buy one of these lenses, but they've been out for a while now, so to be able to pick one up for a couple $1,000, now it's a little bit easier to justify having this beautiful outdoor lens and put it in your camera bag. So I just had to swap lenses and put the 70-200 on the R5, which is filming me right now, just so that I can show you the 24-70. Now, this lens is such a highly versatile lens to use for almost any circumstance. And this is really my advice, is to get a lens like this, or this lens exactly. Now, I realize new, they're about $3,000, but for most videography and photography applications, this is really all you need. The 24-70 zoom range is really good, and the image clarity and sharpness of everything just looks really nice at an f2.8. Now, I realize it's $3,000, but if this is the only lens you have to worry about buying, and you can keep it for years and it'll still be useful and relevant, it's the one to get. Now, I also know that Canon announced the brand new 24-105 f2.8. First of its kind. My suspicion is that's going to be the everything lens to replace the 24 to 70. The good news is that when that happens and a lot of people are looking to help pay for the new lens, you're going to see these on the market drop considerably. So keep an eye peeled for RF 24 to 70 f2.8 lenses. They might be $3,000 new, but you might be able to pick one up used for $2,500, maybe even less. Well, looks like the snow and rain is coming, so I'm going to move this inside. And actually, I forgot to mention something really important. So especially with zoom lenses or any lens for videography, if it doesn't have image stabilization, you are going to be very upset because that shakiness, a lot of it is mitigated with the built-in image stabilization in the lens. And the nice thing is that it's a mechanical image stabilization. Conversely, if you were to look at image stabilization in a phone or a camera body like the R5 or the R7, they use digital image stabilization. Why does that matter? Well, it doesn't really look natural. Sometimes if there's a lot of shake, you get this weird wobble effect and the picture just looks pretty crappy. It's almost warping and it looks bad. So if you get a really good lens with image stabilization, you might not even need digital image stabilization in the camera body. You can just use what's in the lens, and that's what I do. It's really effective. And anyways, if you're buying a used 70 to 200, I had to confirm this because I wasn't 100%, but the Mark 1 EF 70 to 200 does not have image stabilization. So you might find the Mark 1 pretty inexpensive used, but buy the Mark 2 or Mark 3. This is the Mark 3 and it has image stabilization. So just consider that when you're buying these. And one of the more common things you're gonna hear with lens technology is coatings. Now, you would think that, oh, well, a coating shouldn't cost a lot of money, but these coatings are actually pretty important if razor sharp image clarity is very important to you. There's a kind of a lens right at the back here, and sometimes it can reflect and bounce light, creating this kind of sort of misinformation for the sensor in the camera. So you get this kind of distortion in the image quality. Now, to me, for videography, it doesn't bother me that much, but in photos, it could really tick you off. So they put these coating on the lenses, which basically dampen that light from bouncing around. They're almost like absorbing the light in a way that mitigates aberrations, and that's why they cost more, and that's how the technology has improved. But again, between, like, say, the Mark II, which doesn't have those coatings, versus the Mark III, I don't think that's enough for me to justify spending more money on a Mark III, for example. Really what you want, I think, for videography, or what I want the horsepower of the lens in terms of image stabilization and quality and the manufacturing of the glass and the aperture. And there are a lot of other things that I think are important to have. And a bit of aberration in the image is like, I barely notice, no one's really going to notice. But again, this is your quality standards, right? You might be producing at a very high caliber where this is extremely important. So again, totally subjective, but I think even for, sort of professional grade, a lot of people wouldn't even notice. So let's talk about disappointment and some of the frustrations you might come to. Let's say you buy a lens and, oh, you got a camera body picked out and you go. There's a lot of headaches I think you're going to run into if you don't consider a budget for equipment. And I realize when it comes to accessories and equipment, there's a pretty big rabbit hole you can go down, just as much as you could with camera bodies or lenses. But I'm going to keep it very short and to the point, and I want to talk about key things like gimbals, for example, or talking about tripods or microphones, even motorized sliders, anything that I think would be instrumental to help you do better work. And also, reignite some of the excitement for it as well. Like there's a lot of things that I didn't buy till a year or two into making videos. And what I found is when you get a new toy, essentially is what it is, it really just, is this sigh of relief. You're kind of like, this is fantastic. It makes it a lot more fun. And anyways, let's get into some of the kit. locks up nice. I can just set her down. Yeah, that's pretty nice. So let's start with gimbals. I think camera movement, being able to follow a subject or chase a subject, just smooth transitions from locations is what makes an amateur-ish looking video elevate to a professional looking video. There's nothing more frustrating for an audience, especially if they're watching on a larger screen, to see something that's super shaky and makes you kind of nauseous. And just like a drone has sort of that grace of just, this floaty, perfect movement, that's what stabilizers do. And the first stabilizer that I actually bought was the Zhun Crane 3 Lab. It's one of the biggest misconceptions, I think, when you're out in the field. You're like, I don't need a gimbal, I can walk and handheld the shot. Or even if you say had like one of those small rig enclosures, like a cage for the camera with the handle, and you just kind of sort of carry it. When you actually look at playback and you see it on a bigger monitor, you really start to notice how bad it looks. And there's a time and a place for handheld, I think. The shakiness can give kind of that energy and sense of urgency in a shot. But when you're trying to be graceful with it and, following a subject, or, the focus is on what the object or subject is doing, yeah, I think you need a stabilizer. And they're really not that expensive. You could find even a cheap stabilizer that, and I say cheap because of the motors and their weight tolerance, but you could find a cheap stabilizer for, $700. And you could put a light camera and lens on it, and now all of a sudden you have this beautiful movement. But what I would recommend, because I've been using them for a number of years now, the DJI Ronin RS3 Pro, man, this is a good stabilizer. I am so impressed. So why the Pro over, say, the RS3? So the thing is, the Ronin RS3 Pro has a weight tolerance capacity of about 10 pounds, meaning that the motors are strong enough to stabilize a heavy camera and a lens setup. What this does is give you a lot more flexibility in terms of what you can mount on here, say like a 24-70 f2.8 zoom lens and a camera body, and even a microphone receiver on top, or just the tolerance for weight. The Zhun, I think, is only about 6.5 pounds or 6.6 pounds, and once the motors overheat, it just fails and falls over. So,
got it? Yeah, I got it.
I will say that the build quality of the DJI product versus the Zhun product is night and day. The grips feel fantastic. The actual main grip is the battery. There's no individual batteries that you have to remove and charge. I hated that about the Zhun. And the controls feel solid. It just, it doesn't take long for you to realize that you're interacting with a higher caliber, higher quality built product. So yeah, definitely been enjoying that because it's something I use a lot. Like anytime you want to move with the camera to a new location, or you're following a subject like a vehicle or a person walking, like hands down one of the best accessories that you could buy. Just be prepared. It's going to cost you $1,300-1,400. So something to get into. One thing I'll say that you should avoid, and I made the rookie mistake initially, is you buy these creator combo kits that come with a ton of accessories. One of the more exciting ones that caught my attention were these sort of servos that can attach to the lens, and they can actually remotely control zoom and focus. I never use them. They take forever to set up. And there's also all these attachments you can add and accessories. Really the only thing you need, bare bones, is you need this pistol grip for like the briefcase handle, and that's it. Maybe this tripod base. Actually, this is a pretty good accessory. It's a handle, and when you want to set it down, it's a tripod base. That's that's pretty cool. Yeah. So that's really it, is this grip here and this base, which it might even come with it anyways. So anyways, don't buy these huge bundles and stuff unless you really need them. Like I said, I have tons of accessories for the Jun crane kit that I've used twice. Really all I need is the you know, the gimbal stabilizer. And then if I power it back on, even from wherever I'm standing, doesn't matter if I'm like tilted or cockeyed, it'll just automatically calibrate, unlock itself. Ring, done.
Nice.
That's awesome. Another thing that I think is like, thank you DJI for doing this. So the way gimbals work is pretty simple. When you set them up, first time it's gonna throw you for a loop, but it's really not a big deal. So this one's nice, has this kind of detachable plate. Slide it back on. So every stabilizer, you can't just mount a camera and go, like you have to stabilize it properly. You see how it wants to tilt forward? It's nose heavy right now. And the RS3 Pro has this really nice plate where you can just roll it back on these gears and get it nice and stable there, perfect. And obviously, looks like we're a little bit lopsided, but we'll adjust this. I had this set up for a different camera. This is the 80D, by the way. That's why it's all over the place. But it's a good example of how quick or cumbersome it is to set these up. Lock that into place. And there we go. Unlock that. And pretty balanced. So when you fire this thing up, the motors already calibrate depending on fluctuations in weight, but this is what really, the first time I used it, I was like, oh, thank you. It doesn't matter how you're holding it, but man, you press the off button and it just locks into place. It doesn't seem like a big deal, but trust me, having to like manually close everything down and like when you're relocating or hopping in a vehicle or something, yes, that's not the best part. That whole process I went through to set this up, once it's locked in and it remembers what cameras is on here, so you just press and hold it again, and it just boots up, just like that. I love that. It saves so much time, you have no idea. Like, so many times I've like, a shot's coming, a car's coming, or someone, you know, you don't say action yet, and then the person runs out, and it's like, well, you're fumbling with this thing. It's so fast to just fire this up and, you know, get rocking. There we go. Yeah. Outstanding. And you know, it really is impressive in terms of battery life, and I haven't even really used a lot of the features, but it can, you know, track and follow. One of the ones I did, because I knew from the DJI Osmo that we have, is the selfie mode. So like you click 3 times and it just like turns around to face you. If you want to face it back, I always screw this up. It's not 3 times, it's just twice. And then it'll go back around like, it's not doing it. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. Hey, there it is. Very high quality, and I'm so impressed with the Ronin RS3 Pro. Now, most cameras will have a built-in microphone that's 360 degrees. It's okay, but it really doesn't do the job in terms of complementing cinematic storytelling. I would say that quality audio, quality music is just as important as quality picture when you're trying to do, you know, cinematic storytelling. It just cheapens your video if the sound is bad. And I think that, you know, it's intimidating because you don't want to spend more and more money on all these accessories, but you don't have to. So what I want to talk about is some of the options that you can get to improve the quality of your sound. So first thing I'm going to recommend if you're on a budget is just getting a shotgun mic. It's basically a directional mic that mounts onto the top of the camera, and it's directional. So whatever you point it at, it's going to be capturing audio from that direction. Now, If you're buying a shotgun mic, I want to show you kind of the differences, and because the price is so varied across shotgun mics, this is actually the first one that I ever bought is a Takstar, SGC 598. I think we got it off Amazon. It's made in China, but it's been pretty good. So I'm going to show you kind of a quick demo of what it sounds like between these two microphones, because the in-body camera is okay, but you'll see what I mean. Now I'm switching it up to the Takstar, same distance, and we'll see how that sounds. Now, when you compare that, say, to even this Takstar, which is a fairly inexpensive shotgun mic, just mounted to the top of the camera and the same distance, about 10 feet away, there's a notable quality difference. And if you wanted to, say, upgrade to a shotgun mic, and I do recommend it because the longevity of these, you know, if you buy it this year, you'll keep it for forever. It's a really good microphone, is like the Rode NTG5 or the Sennheiser MKE600. So here's what the MKE600 sounds like. So now that I've moved the position of the shotgun mic about 4 feet away, let's see how that sounds, and yeah, let's have a listen. Now, I want to be clear, this is not a fair comparison for what this microphone can do because it is only using a 3.5 millimeter jack, which is essentially a headphone jack, right? It's plugging into the camera amplifier, and much like this Takstar, you're not really stretching its legs in terms of what it can do for quality. But the reason I like the Sennheiser over the Rode is two main reasons. One, it's a little bit less expensive when you consider it comes with some accessories to mount it to a camera, but more importantly, it doesn't require an external power source to work. It's the one thing that always kept me from wanting to buy the Rode NTG5 is that you need an external power source to power the microphone, whereas the Sennheiser can run off of a AA battery. The way I see it, the whole point of doing this is to have something you can do yourself, and it's very compact and you can stay light on your feet. One thing I'll prepare you for, and we'll get to camera bodies here in a moment. If you first plug into the headphone jack to listen to playback on the R5, what you hear is so bad. I thought the footage was going to be unusable. I thought something went horribly wrong with the audio recording, but it's just the playback with the built-in, you know, what's in the camera. It just sounds like crap. And rest assured, the footage turned out perfect. The audio recorded cleanly. It's just when you plug in to monitor to make sure you're getting good, clean audio, it's only one channel, the left, I think, and the quality of it is like not good. So, you know, that's again, compromise that you make with having a small camera body. But it's odd that the R5 does that. But I don't actually get that with the Canon 80D. And this camera came out, whatever, 7 years ago, so a little bit of a bug there. I do want to point out that independent audio recorders are a really good way to go for a lot of applications. They have built-in microphones that kind of capture a 360-degree radius. And you can plug in XLR mics, you can plug in 3.5 millimeter microphones, and they record onto a separate memory card. Here's why I like them. They sound incredibly better than like a traditional in-body camera setup. Sound start in 3, 2, in 3, 2, 1. 1. Low-end sounds are hard to pick up on a microphone, so you increase the sensitivity or gain of the microphone. Problem is, something comes into frame, makes a loud bang sound, or whatever, it tends to sound really broken up and unusable. Well, floating points allow you to record basically dual points for gain, so that no matter if something is really quiet or if something gets really loud, it's always going to be recording at high fidelity, really high quality, no matter the circumstances. And this is what, like an example of using an independent recorder of a car going by versus using a shotgun mic mounted onto a camera with a car going by. Mark. The quality is notable. The only thing that I don't like about doing this, especially if you're just kind of running and gunning and doing this on your own, is you have to sequence all the audio together. So because they're MP3 files or they're separate files to the video, nothing is synced to what you recorded. So you have to line it up and mark it. You'll see people with slates or clapping their hands doing that. But yeah, you have to match up the audio. If you just plug in directly to the preamp of the camera, then it's all recorded together, so it saves you a bit of time in editing, so something to consider. The last type of microphone I want to talk about, and it is really an important one, is something like a lapel mic. What I'm wearing right now, this little guy right here, this is typically what you see for, interviews, documentaries. Lapel mics are typically connected to a transmitter like this that, gives you better quality audio, and it's wireless, and, it's really the best and only way to go, I think, if you're going to be recording and interviewing people. My recommendation, I remember when we first bought the Rode Wireless Go. It was the first iteration of this. Actually, I have them still. Hold on. Here we go. This is the very first of its kind from Rode, the Rode Wireless Go. The previous generation of a transmitter and receiver, there were like 4 times the size of this. And what was really cool is they have a built-in microphone, so you don't actually need a lavalier or another microphone. You can literally hold this like this, or clip it on to anything, and it's a really versatile solution to, like I said, keeping it lightweight, keeping it simple and easy to use. The only issue I ran into these is that I don't know why I never had them inspected, but I think it's the magnetic shielding on the Rode Wireless Go that had an issue, because cell phones, or for whatever reason, I'd be recording out in the field, and I would get a horrible amount of feedback, or like hissing and popping, and it really got annoying. but no one really made a competitor to this product. And the Rode Wireless Go 2 had come out, and the only difference really from the initial one was two people talking at the same time. Before, you couldn't do that. So now, recording right onto the video footage, you could have one person talking, clip it onto another person, and have both dialogue tracks synced with the video. That's a big deal.
Yeah, I see. Oh, that looks pretty cool.
Yeah. I was wondering why the bottom was all loose.
Look at that.
Saves a lot of time, and again, if you're doing this by yourself, it's ideal. There is a new Wireless Pro, I think, from Rode, and that might be worth considering getting instead. They didn't exist when I bought the 2s, but the difference is between the Pro and the 2s mainly is the fact that they have a floating point for recording. So remember I was describing independent audio recorders that could, whether it's loud or quiet, you're always getting high fidelity sound. Now these little guys will be able to do that. It's a little bit more money, but I wish they existed before I bought the 2s, because I would have just bought the Pros. But that's mixing my favorite thing about being able to sync audio with video easily, and an independent recorder that can record high fidelity, very nice quality audio. Yeah, I would, if you can spring for it, go for it. All of these tools, essentially up until this point, are useful and versatile for practically any type of videography that you're going to be doing. This, on the other hand, this next item is something that you may or may not want to get, but I strongly urge you to consider, and that's the Edelkrone Slider. This thing has been instrumental to getting beautiful, nice B-roll, especially for product photography. I don't care if you're filming cars, I don't care if you're filming camera equipment, video games, whatever. I use this slider almost every film shoot that I go on, because literally, I did a whole video on this, but it's so fast to set up. And the fact that you can use it in practically any situation, it's so compact and small, just as useful as a gimbal might be. It's something that can take you from looking like an amateur to looking like a professional. The Edelkrone Slider, the little rotating head, the little legs that kick out, I did buy those since the last video we did, and that flex tilt head, like, we'll get into the price towards the end. Like I said, we'll stay within that budget of 5 or 10 grand. It's one of those accessories I have a hard time, just even like a telephoto lens, you know. It's hard to think about when you would use it, but I'm telling you, if you had it, you would be using it all the time, because I do, and I love it. Now, at this point in the video, I don't blame you if you just want to quit and say, what is the point of doing all this? This is way too much, and I'm not. I'm just gonna film with my phone. I'm done. I've been there where it's just, you get to a point where there's so much information and it's so overwhelming. It really is what stops you from buying certain things. Here's the thing, for a really long time, I was hoping that, camera phones would catch up to the point where they would look like, a cinematic video. But they just haven't. But let me explain why. So this is actually my, my very first, we'll call it cinema grade iPhone, which it's really not. But it's the iPhone X. And I remember when it came out, geez, there we go. When you took a photo, it would take another photo that would essentially compress the background or blur it out so that it looked like compression. I'll get into that in a minute, but essentially, it took really nice photos that looked like almost a DSLR camera or a mirrorless camera. And even jumping ahead, let's say, to the iPhone Pro model. So this is the 14 Pro. And this is a really, really high quality, competent smartphone. And the camera on it is bar none the best I've ever used.
Now, I'm putting the iPhone into video mode, use the third lens as a telephoto, and
thing is, even with all the technological advancements that it has, the video doesn't quite cut it. Now, here's what's important. Just like the portrait on the old iPhone was a significant leap for smartphone photography. In the back of my mind then, I was like, man, I wish they applied that to video. How cool would it be if we could get compression and that kind of blurry background with the subject in focus when we're actually filming video? This phone can do that. I am pretty impressed with what it can do. Real-time processing, you know, creating this image that it genuinely looks almost like a lens compression, you know, with that aperture and that blur. It's really close. And I don't blame people for thinking like, I'll just film on an iPhone, you know, it's good enough. Like, why should I pay for more money to get all this stuff when this is what I carry around with me all the time? Here's the thing, I'm not bashing this, saying that you couldn't make cinematic quality videos with an iPhone. Here's the thing, if you look behind the scenes for a lot of this stuff, they have like this little cage where the iPhone slides in and it's like boom, an F2.8 lens or an F1.4. It's got gimbal stabilizers and all these accessories. And I just kind of laughed when I saw that because, well, it's not really filming on just an iPhone. You're building it out just like you would a DSLR mirrorless camera with all these accessories. So yeah, do I think it's on par? I don't know. I mean, I don't want to hurt anyone's feelings, but it's just not. You know, I wish it was. I really wish it was, because I always have my iPhone on me, and I always find it much more convenient to just pull out a phone and grab that quick shot. But the one thing I'll say is that these videos and photos look good on an iPhone. When you put them on a TV or when you put them on a larger monitor, that's when you really start to see the image sort of falling apart.
But you can see how the iPhone just kind of struggles with the edges a bit. And hold on. There we go. And you can even see under the railing on the iPhone, it's almost like it's still in focus through that little gap there. And that's the difference I'm talking about. You can kind of cheat it with a smartphone, but they're still not quite there. And even if I shift to the background and back to the railing, it's pretty fast, but it still looks kind of weird. See how the gap shows the focus? It has a hard time distinguishing. If I were to do that with the R5 and this 24-70 lens, there's the background, back to the railing, back to the background, back to the railing. It just looks a lot nicer.
It's not fair to criticize something without talking about the technology and how it makes a difference. So this is what I'll explain. Probably first and foremost, the reason I wouldn't shoot cinematic grade videos with an iPhone is because of the sensor size. Now, DSLR and mirrorless cameras, the sensors that they have in the camera body are much bigger than what iPhones or Samsungs or any smartphones can literally fit in the actual size of the device. Most people would just say, well, an iPhone can film in 4K, a mirrorless camera films in 4K, what's the difference? Well, it really has a lot to do with pixel size. Now, especially what Apple's done is really quite clever. They have a quad pixel sensor technology, which basically gives you that kind of definition and detail, and the sensor can be a fourth of the size. It's really, really small. And it's impressive the quality of the image you can get out of it. One of the things you'll notice on these sensors is that you tend to get a lot of artifacting or loss of image clarity. Essentially what you get is kind of this blocky, textury, it looks sort of funny and cartoony. It doesn't quite look natural. the sensor is so small, it can't let in a lot of light. There's a lot of really clever image processing that's going on real time in your phone to brighten the image, give it more brilliance. What ends up happening is you get this kind of digital over sharpening effect where everything has kind of harsh lines and sort of these weird cartoony outlines. It's trying to emulate what these cameras do. Is it very good at doing it? Yes. I mean, it's so impressive to see the video quality you can get, especially with this iPhone 14 Pro. Like, I'm genuinely impressed, even with their new lenses that kind of bend and refract, because they can't, I mean, Jesus, a telephoto lens on this is sticking out just a little bit. Look at the telephoto lens for here, plus the camera. Like, I think from a technology standpoint, it's remarkable that a smartphone can achieve this kind of image quality. But to my standard and what I would feel is acceptable for like your main camera to make cinematic storytelling, it doesn't quite cut it. The other thing I'll say that I'm kind of disappointed with is the compression or bokeh effect. Remember earlier I was talking about kind of that blurry background that the original iPhone did with photos, and now you can do it with video. If you look closely at the footage, and you don't even have to look that closely, it's pretty obvious what it's doing. It's, you know, you're essentially recording with two different lenses, and one of them, maybe even three, all three of the lenses, but it's blurring one out and it's layering the one in focus over top. And you really notice it with edges, and you start to see kind of the holes in the technology. And anyways, I would be embarrassed to submit a project for a client, or even to look back at my own video projects and be like, well, that looks bad. It's the same reason why, you know, way back for the WhyBuy episodes, we decided like, we're not gonna make them with smartphones. It's convenient and it's great that they can film at the quality they can, but when you compare it to a mirrorless camera or even a DSLR camera, the difference is night and day. You know, the other thing I'll say just in my defense here is I don't think having an iPhone is convenient and practical in all the ways, especially when you think of storage or you think of battery life. Sometimes you're on a shoot for a full day, and if you're recording on your phone and operating other devices like the Edelkrone, or you're making calls or checking a script, what happens when you need to swap a battery or have more charge? You know, you need extra accessories for all these things. And what I found is that it's more cumbersome. And like I said, it's emulating, right? Like all you're doing is sort of recreating what this is for your iPhone, and you're not getting as good of results. So A, are you really saving as much money? And B, is it really that much more convenient? The crazy thing is like something as simple as a software update might prove me wrong, and I might fire this up one day and be like, wow, that looks amazing. Technology's progressing at quite a rapid rate. So again, what I'm saying is probably going to be irrelevant to not much time, but anyways, my experience, take it or leave it, make your own conclusions. Okay, now let's get into the meat and potatoes of this, the camera bodies. It's a complicated topic. There's a lot of technology and a lot of things to discuss, but let's just keep it simple, keep it light. And I kind of want to just share what my experience has been like using these cameras in the field and why I think you would buy one over the other. And the reason I'm picking Canon is largely due in part to how I opened this video. And I mentioned those movies and TV shows that were filmed with DSLR cameras. That was kind of how I stumbled across the notion that you could even make high quality cinematic looking videos with something that's so compact and so small. It was actually a Canon 5D Mark III or Mark IV, and it had a 24-105 kit lens on it, the f4, and I played around with it for a bit, and I was like, oh my God, this is it. This is the camera. This is how I can achieve that look. And what do I mean by that look? Do you see how this shot looks different than this shot? Or how this shot feels more cinematic than this shot? Now, technically, this effect is called shallow depth of field, or bokeh. And what it does is essentially focus on an item like our own eyes would, and it creates this sort of effect where everything, depending on how far away or how close it is, might be more or less blurry. And that aperture in lenses that are more expensive, what we were talking about earlier, the lower this number, the greater the effect you're going to have in creating this sort of style or look in the footage. You know, going way back here to like when I was like 10, 11 years old, this is the very first camera that I ever used to make videos. And, you know, used to steal it from my dad or beg him, like, can I borrow this? I want to make some movies, you know, and I took it again. But this is a camera that always pissed me off, mainly because no matter what I did, it would always be in focus. And anything I would film would always be 100% in focus. And that's because this lens is designed so that, like a smartphone, let's say, whatever you're filming, whether you zoom in or not, you're gonna get everything in focus. There's gonna be no shallow depth of field, no bokeh, and it's good for home movies, but it's really bad for cinematic storytelling. When I first picked up that Canon 5D, it completely changed my perception of what was accessible to kind of everyday people, so to speak. Because in my head, to achieve this kind of cinematic look, this beautiful cinematography, I just assumed like, oh, well, probably need like a $50,000 or $100,000 camera. And, you know, it's the reason why I don't want to talk about Arri Alexas or the Red Dragon or any of those really high-end 8K or 16K cameras in this video, because that's an entirely different animal. And my point with this video is to show that for a reasonable budget, you can achieve some really impressive results. And this really harkens back to what got me into, you know, videography and telling stories this way in the first place. So that's why I'm talking about Canon. That's why I'm talking about DSLR and mirrorless cameras. This is where I came in, the Canon 80D, a camera that came out in 2016, and I still think it's a really good camera. The amount of features and how good the image quality is for a camera that really can cap out at full HD or 1080p. I'm still impressed with how resourceful it is in unique situations. Yes, it doesn't compare to modern mirrorless cameras, but I still really like it, and it's an excellent B camera to have on hand. Now, here's the thing. Digital single reflex cameras, or DSLR cameras, basically use a mirror to shoot the image into a sensor, and this was kind of the first iteration of a very compact technology, and it's the same with the Canon 5D. This is where we really start to see a shift in video coming in such a compact form, producing image quality that was very impressive. It wasn't until later that mirrorless cameras saved weight, produced better quality, had some issues, but essentially they'd come to completely replace this older technology. I don't really want to get into what makes mirrorless cameras of today better than DSLR cameras of yesterday. Just know that if you wanted to buy something like this, it only cost you about $1,000, I think even new. You might think, well, why would I even waste my time? The truth is a lot of footage that you're seeing and have seen in previous episodes in WhyBuy were all shot on this camera. Most people wouldn't think that it's very old, but when you understand lighting, when you have the right accessories, again, you can make it cinematic and look very good. This is still a very competent camera, and it's important because it will factor into your purchase decision, I think, once you understand what you're getting extra in the R7 or even the R5. And I just want to circle back just a minute to like choosing Canon. Like, why not Sony? Why not Blackmagic? Why not Nikon? Like, there are other brands that make cameras that are very comparable, almost identical. Like, not to sound like a generalist, but everyone kind of has their pros and cons. I honestly think, depending on what system you buy into initially, because of the lenses, because of the functionality of the camera, it's probably where you're going to stay stuck. Just like buying an Xbox or a PlayStation, you're sort of sucked into this world of, you know, all these accessories and how to use it. But the one thing I'll say, because I have shot on Nikon, I have shot on Panasonic, I have shot on Sony, and I've not shot on Blackmagic, but I've played around with one a little bit. The point is, I really like Canon for a few specific reasons. One, to me, it almost feels like the Apple of the group. Like an iPhone or something. It's not the best at any particular thing, but it's really good and user-friendly on a variety of applications, whether it's photography or videography. It's really easy to use. That I very much like. I can't stress the importance of when you're out in the field and a situation is happening and you need to react fast or need to change something quickly. It really feels like these cameras were designed with the user in mind, and in terms of placement, function, all these sort of things. I mean, it's got its flaws, and probably there's some personal bias. But the one thing you'll notice, even if you're a newcomer to the brand, is the build quality of these products from Canon is really high. I think for the money, what you're getting is really, it feels nice. It's very functional. The resolutions in the screen is really good. And even their lenses, the quality of their glass is really good for what it costs to buy it. And that's kind of what's kept me, I think, with Canon is as I buy more lenses and get more accessories, the price points are fair and the quality is really high. So that's why Canon and not the others, but it's not to say that I wouldn't shoot on any of the others because they're all outstanding. And again, better in some ways, a lot of ways than Canon is. But anyways, there's another standout feature that I'll talk about why Canon kind of beats the rest. How they record information for color, especially for editing, saves a lot of time and you get really beautiful images that feel natural, they feel good. And speaking on color really quick, industry standard, most people will film in what's called a log profile, which is kind of geared more towards high dynamic range. So the camera's filming in a flat color profile, which is gray essentially, picking up a lot of texture and detail so that after you're applying computing power and editing to apply what are called LUTs, or like preset color palettes. And Canon color is not only good for that, but even if you were to just film just with how the camera bakes in the footage, from the get-go and not apply any color adjustments after, it is really quite impressive what you get. So again, the Apple of all of these products. It's really quite impressive how easy this camera system is to use, all the way from entry-level Canon cameras to the higher-end ones. It's a great feeling product, and it's easy to kind of get going. Now, what I really like about this style of camera bodies, well, for starters, this, I think, is very important, a flip-out monitor, simply because I love field monitors, but I hate the fact that you have to mount them to something and they're this big, bulky kind of mini TV you got to take with you everywhere. It's got to have separate power. It's got to be mounted on a cage. Typically, it just gets in the way. To have something like a field monitor that's built into the camera and is just already here, Canon has really nice monitors built into their cameras in terms of resolution and giving you a fairly accurate portrayal of what you're filming. So that was a big reason, I think, just form and function, why I like these style of cameras. Okay, so why the Canon R7 versus the R5? Why not the R8? Or why not the R6 or R6 Mark II? Here's the thing. I wanted to focus on two cameras that could achieve very good results, were sort of leaders in the industry in their class, but had a very big price gap difference. Because when you look at the R7 as an entry-level mirrorless camera, let's say it's around $2,000, and the R5, for example, is around $5,000. Why would you consider one over the other? And I think it's important because what I mentioned earlier, you think about buying into these ecosystems or getting into this as a hobby or profession. Sometimes you just want to spend all the money and be like, wow, just get it over with, get all the best stuff right off the bat. And this is my point. You might not have to, depending on how you're going to be using this. For starters, the Canon R7, R5 have a lot of similarities. They're both made by Canon. They're both kind of industry leading in their class, and you're getting fantastic image quality from both. They have a lot of the same functionality. I mean, there's different number of wheels and buttons. The R5 has a little bit more because I think it's geared more towards a hybrid photography and videography camera. But I would say form and function wise, they both offer a great solution. The main difference you're going to come up first thing, and why the R7 is cheaper, is because of the sensor size. Now, the R7 has a cropped sensor, APS-C camera, and the R5 is a full frame sensor, or a 35mm equivalent, which is like the industry standard for, you know, movies and stuff. It's kind of like the baseline standard for making high quality video storytelling. Here's the thing. You could argue that a larger sensor captures more information, therefore it is a better image quality, and an APS-C sensor isn't ever going to be as good. I have a hard time with that because it's in rare instances that you could even spot that. I did this test, I put both cameras with this bracket, and you know, I shot, again, at the same focal length, same setting, same lighting, both cameras, and it's really hard to tell the difference between the two. I think what really gives it away is the fact that the APS-C is the crop sensor. What ends up happening is you get this punch in that happens on lenses. So like, for example, a 24mm filming on a APS-C camera is more like a 38mm. And the reason that is because the sensor size, because it's smaller, it doesn't actually use the full diameter of the lens and what the image is being captured. It has to kind of zoom in, so to speak. So you get this kind of additional zoom on a lens that it doesn't really matter if you're trying to capture something far away. It's actually a benefit, I think. It's only when you're doing wide angle shots. Like you couldn't get a true 14mm or 24mm, like if you mounted it in a car and you wanted just to try and back out as much as you could. On an APS-C camera, it's always going to be punched in a little bit because of the crop sensor. The best way I would put it is that the APS-C sensor on the R7 paired with the camera body and a good lens, you can achieve very, very good results. But the facts are the facts. The R5 can shoot 45 megapixel images and the R7 can only shoot 33. 33 megapixels is a lot. A lot of people say that 26 is like the sweet spot for the perfect photograph. Again, it's just, I'm just talking about facts here, and it really, I think it matters more so with the video aspect, because if you're trying to future-proof this camera and have something that could be useful more long-term, the R5 can shoot in 8K, and the R7 can't. So while all of our TVs and broadcast materials, you know, 4K becoming a standard, what happens when it's 8K and you have to upgrade and all that stuff? I suppose that's the best defense, but either way, as an 8K camera, it's like barely there. I don't know if I'd have it at a steady 8K camera, but it can. So I don't know. It goes to the R5 so far. So let's move on. So another area that I think is going to really matter, especially shooting out in the field, is frame rates, or available frame rates that the camera can handle. Now, when you think about slow motion, all that is taking something at a very high frame rate and slowing it down to 24 frames a second equivalent, so you get the slow motion effect. In a nutshell, the R7 can shoot 60 frames a second in 4K. The R5 can shoot not just 60, but 120 frames per second. So in short, the R5 can do slower motion. And you know, why do you need it? Well, the fact of the matter is, for things like sports or animals, or say, for example, you were doing B-roll of a building or a house, or you're filming a car in motion, a higher frame rate is really nice, not just to be able to capture slow motion, but it's capturing information at a higher frame rate, meaning that there's not going to be a lot of like distortion or image detail loss. You're capturing things much faster, and where it really comes in handy, I think, is, let's say you didn't have a gimbal or like a stabilizer for the camera, and you wanted to get B-roll just like you know, this really smooth motion. Well, if you were shooting at 24 frames a second, it would look choppy. Whereas at 60 frames or 120 frames a second, if you slowed it down, it might be this perfect brief 2 to 3 seconds of like, ooh, yeah, really nice. And that's where I think the benefit comes in. However, what I will say is 60 frames a second is pretty enough, if you ask me. Like, yes, 120 frames would be better, but I think 60 frames a second is more than adequate to capture slow motion, if you will. Like, it's what I've been doing on the 80D for a very long time, and there's a lot of other benefits too. Like when you think of storage, 120 frames a second, the file sizes just keep growing and growing on your memory card, and for editing as well, it just kind of, you know, becomes more cumbersome. Whereas 60 frames a second still suffers from that, but it's not as bad. You know, it's half of the amount of storage required and processing power in editing, and taking up a bunch of storage on your computer's hard drive. So something to consider. I've never been left wanting for 120 frames a second. I don't film enough things that would require super, super slow-mo. But if I had to award this round to the camera, it's, yeah, the R5, obviously, because if you ever needed more slow motion, the R5 could do it. One of the things that I think people tend to overlook, and it's a really, really important point with these types of cameras, is battery life. Battery life will make or break how you plan a shoot or when you call it quits because you have no more batteries. Canon makes a phenomenally good battery. The LP6 battery that I bought for the Canon 80D is a really, really good battery, but the new iteration they made with higher capacity, the LP6-E or the LPE6, is really, really good. Like, I would say if even in the R7 or the R5, battery life is going to be comparable. If you're filming at the same frame rate and same conditions, same lens, it's going to be pretty on point. But just know, like Canon batteries, you could in a day filming like consistently all day, you could probably get away with 2 batteries and be fine. They are pretty impressive and they're versatile. Like you could throw them into the Edelkrone, for example, to power the slider. In fact, you need to. My point is like if you bought extra batteries, it's nice to be able to use them in different applications, and they're universal. Like the R7 and the R5 use the exact same battery. You can use the LPE6 and the LP6, like the new and the old battery, and the Canon 80D, the old camera, the new cameras. I really like that they kept that consistent. The other thing to take into consideration, and especially if you're filming, again, by yourself, you don't have a camera operator, you don't have someone on the lens and on the crane or whatever the hell, is autofocus. Like Canon autofocus is really, really good. And even on the 80D, it was really good. It has a very good understanding of tracking subjects and knowing when they leave and come back into frame. It understands, you know, the depth of the subject or when it's moving, and it's very, very fast. I was actually kind of overwhelmed with the expansion of autofocus functionality in the R7 and the R5. There's just so many options, and the one thing I'll say is on either camera, just play with it a bit and get used to it, because you might select an autofocus mode that is kind of like too advanced for what you're doing. Like it might be tracking something and you just want to shoot some basic B-roll. It might actually be annoying because it's trying to do more than what you want it to. But all in all, I think, yeah, in terms of having a camera system with autofocus, pair that with the lenses and how good they are. Yeah, like it's so easy to get really nice shots. In terms of which autofocus system is better on the Canon R7 or in the R5, I don't think if you bought either camera, you'd be wondering after the fact, like, I wonder if that other camera had better autofocus. Like, Canon's is so rock solid. So how do I bottom line this for you in terms of which camera body to buy? This is a tough one because from a price standpoint, the R7, obviously, you're gonna get terrific image quality. I don't even think you would notice that you're getting sort of a compromise in terms of sensor and the capabilities of the camera in the field using this camera all the time, you'd be more than happy with the R7. But the one thing I'll say based on my experience is that if you commit to buying a camera body to be your steady, the one you always go to, you always grab, I would highly suggest trying to save up or try and find your way to the R5, simply because you'll probably end up using this camera for years to come. I still use the 80D, and I've had it for several years, and I've never once regretted, you know, going a little bit extra to try and get a better camera. The R5, I think in a lot of ways will be a good decision for the future. You'll have a larger sensor, full frame, you'll have 8K recording capability, and despite that the R7 does hold its own, in the long run, when you're considering this as an investment, the R5 would be a better camera to buy, because even if you think about resale value, an R5 would be more desirable on the used market than an R7. Now, if you are considering the R5, there's a pretty high likelihood you're going to look at the R6 Mark II because the price is so close, and the R6 Mark II is a newer camera with a lot of updated features. The R6 Mark II does have better autofocusing than the R5. It's just a newer system, and it's going to be a better solution if you think the autofocus on the R5 or even the R7 isn't up to par. But like I've said, you'll be pretty blown away with what it can do anyway. So I don't consider that to be a reason to get the R6 Mark II. The other thing, I think that despite the fact that the R6 Mark II is a newer camera, I think the image quality is still better on the R5, which says a lot considering it's been a few years since the R5 came out. I still think it's a better hybrid camera than the R6 Mark II if you're looking to do photography and videography. So it's up to you. Like I said, even between the R7 and the R5, I don't think you're going to be disappointed with either choice. It really comes down to some very niche applications where it would matter to buy one or the other. So now another camera that you might consider if you're kind of leaning more towards the R7 is the R8, which in fact is a full frame sensor camera, and it's around the same price point as the R7. But here's the issue. It doesn't use the same LP6 or LP6 batteries, and trust me, that's a huge drawback, not being able to use those batteries in that camera. It doesn't have in-body stabilization, which I mentioned is not that big of a compromise, but I think where you're really going to start to notice the cost cutting in the R8 is the fact that it will overheat at around 2 hours or so, which for a full frame camera or a full frame sensor, if you're looking for that, just get the R5. And I know some of you are like, oh, but the R5 overheats like crazy. When it came out, the R5 did have an issue with overheating, shooting sustained 4K video, whether it was at 29.9 frames per second or at 60 frames per second, 120 frames a second. And that's why a lot of people gravitated towards the R5C, because they built in that little fan that could give you continuous shooting. They did a software patch for the R5, and I haven't experienced overheating as being an issue anymore. In fact, filming a lot of this dialogue, I've been filming continuously for probably several hours now, and I haven't run into overheating issues. So again, going back to the point, the R8, while it may be a full frame sensor camera, there are a lot of compromises juxtaposed to the R5. So between the R7 and the R8, I would say go with the R7, because even though it's an APS-C, so a crop sensor, I think with all the features, you're better off going with the R7, because you can still mount full frame camera lenses to it, and it has more functionality than the R8. So anyways, so let's get back to the main topic here. Essentially, how can you make this work for a budget of $5,000 or $10,000? And what would be realistic to have a cinema camera setup? My first suggestion is, budget about $1,000 at least for accessories. Now, mainly what you're going to want is a tripod, and the tripod that I've been using from Promaster is really good, but there's a lot of different tripods out there, and the main thing that you want to go for is a fluid head tripod, something that when you pan or tilt, there's fluid in the head giving you very smooth motion. And you'd be surprised, like there are certain brands that cost a lot of money and it's usually just kind of a legacy item that you're paying for. They don't really offer much in the way of additional benefits. Promaster, I think, is a good line to get bang for your buck. And especially when you think about this tripod with the fluid head that I'm talking about, you're really only spending about $400 for something that you'll use on every professional shoot. And while you might not take it with you everywhere because it's kind of big and has its own bag, it's definitely nice to be making videos with something so stable and versatile. It's yeah, for the price, it's kind of a steal. The other thing I'd say, again, keeping within that kind of $1,000 for accessories, if you can afford the Sennheiser MKE600 Shotgun Mic, I highly suggest getting that one. It's about $400, which isn't cheap, but you will use this forever. It will be a shotgun mic that you can use in studios for podcasts. You can use it for, you know, mounting on top of the camera out in the field. You can use it as a standalone recording system if someone's a sound guy and has a boom with it. If you can afford it, go for the Sennheiser. If not, at the very least, get an entry-level shotgun mic like this one, because the in-body microphones don't cut it. And with that, that leaves you a bit of budget for buying memory cards and maybe a spare battery. Now, here's the real conundrum. If you buy an R5, your budget's pretty much tapped, because that camera is, you know, $3,000–4,000. Again, I'm talking all in Canadian pricing, by the way. So if you're listening to this and you're like, that's outrageous, welcome to Canada. But if you buy an R5, a lot of your budget's going into the camera body, not leaving you much in the way of lenses. So keep that in mind here. You're gonna need a lens, and a really good lens. So I suggest either buying a used EF lens for a couple $1,000, maybe the 24–105 f4. But if you can, I really suggest getting the 24–70 f2.8, simply because it's diverse, it would be a workhorse, you'd use it all the time, and it is useful in almost every application. Throw it on a stabilized gimbal, throw it on a tripod, go handheld. That lens is extremely versatile and the image quality is superb. Plus, if you ever wanted to resell it, it's a desirable lens. It's an f2.8. The focal range in it is really good, like the zoom function, like people will want that lens. In fact, see if you can find one used. They're new, but like I said before, that f2.8 24–105 that's coming out may drop the price on those, because that new lens may become more desirable as the everyday carry. So that brings our budget to essentially, you know, $2,000 plus $3,000, $5,000, and that's your R7 and the lens, and then, you know, $1,000 for accessories. So really tough to do with an R5 here. I would say you should probably start thinking about, if you want to go higher quality, better future proofing and so on, let's keep the budget under $10,000. So with the R5 and the lens and the aforementioned accessories, we're probably sitting near around $6,000. Now, I mentioned the Edelkrone slider with the head one and the slider and the legs and the flex tilt head. All of that in, you know, a package is essentially going to set you back about $1,000. And is it worth getting? I think so, but it may be an item that you can do without for now, but we'll keep it as a tentative item. The one thing I would say that would be extremely beneficial is the Rode Wireless Go 2 or the Rode Wireless Pro, mainly because it is the best way to capture dialogue and people talking. There's nothing worse than doing an interview or a documentary piece and the person talking, you can't have clear audio for their dialogue. It's really frustrating for the audience, and it's frustrating for editing too. So that's gonna be another $500 or $300. $500 for the Pro and $300 for the Wireless Go 2. So keep that in mind as well. The other thing that I think is worth getting, definitely, is a 3-axis gimbal for you know, those stabilized track shots. I think that if you can afford the DJI Ronin RS3 Pro, that's going to be your best bet in terms of investment because of the extra weight tolerance. There's a lot of gimbals that are cheaper, both from DJI and Zhun, but what you're going to find is that they cap out at around 5 or 6 pounds in weight tolerance. It's basically going to limit you on the weight capacity you can put on this thing. And it's not that it's a huge deal, but you're going to run into frustrations when, you know, you're out filming, you're trying to capture something, and then all of a sudden it's just like, and dies. You know, the motors overheat and they just can't take the weight. So I think the RS3 Pro is around $1,400. So it's a bit of a touch. Maybe decide whether the Edelkrone Slider or that is going to be more your thing, because if you do a lot of product photography, the slider makes more sense. If you're outside a lot and you're filming a lot of movement, then a 3-axis gimbal makes more sense. So all in all, I'd say we've done a pretty good job of staying under budget or just around the budget. And, you know, I realize I'm not being supremely accurate with the numbers here because there are sales and, you know, the prices are changing all the time. There's new products that come out. The way I would kind of look at this and approach it is, if you're just kind of dipping your toe in the water, set aside like a couple $1,000, you know, buy a used camera body and a used lens and see how you like the process of doing this. You can achieve pretty good results with something on a low budget. That might be a good entry point for you. And rent, you know, try and test out some products that you think you might want to buy and get some hands-on time with them. You may find that, oh, this is really worth it, and I'll spring for the extra money to get this, and you'll enjoy it because you know that it's something you like using. I think if you wanted to do this more seriously, you're probably going to be looking at spending $5,000. And if you want to make your life easier to achieve better cinematography, for sure you'll be spending around $10,000. But if you look at it over time and you try and use your budget wisely, check out sales, try and find used equipment, you can make this work for you. And when I think back to how long I've been doing this and the type of equipment I've decided to purchase versus rent or try and save and purchase, it's really just some core elements that are cumbersome not to have on hand, you know. And to say, you know, that you couldn't use an iPhone would be silly. Of course you can use an iPhone. In fact, use a GoPro, you know, or one of those Insta360 cameras. Like, I think the hardest part about getting into this is justifying to yourself that this is worth the money, even if you don't have it, you know, trying to like get it on payments or something. Because if you can accept that these tools are really good for the money, like the technology that you're getting for the price is outstanding, get past the fact that it costs what it does. It's an investment into creating things that are remarkable. I think all of us have what we consider to be a standard for quality of what we want to achieve and what we consider to be good work. It's always subjective and it's always your style and what you want to do. I've tried very hard to stretch every dollar and get the best value products that I possibly can because I don't have unlimited resources, and sometimes the best thing you can possibly do is just get some hands-on time with the products, you know, try and experience what it's like to use them. And I've watched a lot of tech reviews and different influencers go deep and dive into the technology and explain how it all works. And there's a lot of resources in this industry to learn about the products. For me, you know, it wouldn't be much of a product review if I didn't show you what it was like and share my experience in the field. So, you know, enjoy some just footage that I've taken with these different cameras, with these different lenses, and you be the judge. Like, it's really up to you as to what you think looks good. And we're not even going to get into the fact that you're probably watching this on a streaming platform, it's YouTube or whatever. You're not even getting the full quality for the audio and the video anyways. So, you know, use your best judgment, but I can guarantee you that the fear that comes with wanting to buy something like this, it's immediately squashed when you get it. You'll be happy with it and you'll be grateful that you did yourself that favor. But if you can, try and rent it, try and get hands-on with it beforehand, just to double check that the, you know, rabbit hole you went down, you know, confirming that this is the right thing actually meets your expectations in person and hands-on. If you can't do that, well, I feel for you, but I still don't think you'll be disappointed. So anyways, before I close it out, again, huge thanks to the video sponsor, McBain Camera. If you're looking to buy the equipment or anything that was covered in here, everything that wasn't covered, they carry a ton of different products, so many different brands for accessories and cameras and lenses, and a great place to deal with. And I highly recommend, even just online, you know, buying from their store. It's a great place to deal with. And thank you again to McBain for giving me all these toys to play with to make this video and sponsoring WhyBuy. So anyways, thank you for watching. And if you thought this video was helpful, please like and subscribe, show your support. And well, I'd say thanks for watching, but I just said that, didn't I?
"60 frames a second." I missed.
What I'd like to do is share my experience of using this equipment in the field and what has actually mattered to me when I'm running and gunning or planning a shoot. I'm out in rural British Columbia and there's a garbage truck. The timing of this, like, what are the odds? Once in a blue, probably comes around once a month. And again, the image quality difference is just, you can't really compare the two. Well, you can. You can compare the two. Duh. I'm going to. Now let's get some close-ups of the... Bam. Actually, I wonder if this thing will fire up. Runs off of... Oh, that's going to take a lot of AA batteries. Moment of truth. I'll find a way. Original bag. I'm gonna plug it in. Moment of truth, redemption. Oh, wait a minute. No way. It's because it was on lock. Oh. It's, let's see if I can... Yep, still works. Even looking back at this camera now, it's pretty impressive what it can do. It's got image stabilization, autofocus. There's like transitions and effects you can use when you're actually recording. Like, this is as much of a camera device. It's also like an editing software built in. You know, credit to Sony for providing something like this. And like I said, it's still cool to have today. Nice relic. Oh, no cassette. Sounds like a bomb's about to go off. Listen to that. Get down!
Officially minus 32. Ah. Okay, first gonna do the R5. No image stabilization. That's the R5 at 27. My brain is frozen, I can't even think. That's the R5 at, you could almost see there was a little bit of trouble just with the reflection on the car. The autofocus was kind of hunting a bit, but well, that's the R5. Let's see now how the R7 does. Here goes nothing. Whew. Yeah, the air definitely hurts. Let's see what it looks like. I definitely noticed just right off the bat with the crop sensor, zooming in, say, like to 70mm was pointless, because I tried following the same track that I did for the R5, and, you know, it's not going to be exact, but it was definitely zoomed in more, and, you know, I would have had to take a few steps back to compensate for the crop sensor. And Yeah, anyways, there's definitely a difference. Anyways, now that I've done a couple walk-arounds with the R5 and the R7, I'm actually going to do it with the iPhone in cinematic mode and then just regular video mode and see how that looks by comparison. Okay, iPhone, let's see how you compare. And keep in mind, I don't have a gimbal for the iPhone, so I got to walk really slowly, but here goes nothing. Okay, this is the regular using the 1x zoom, and let's see how this works. And you know, just by looking at the cinematic mode, you can kind of see what I'm talking about, just with that sort of faux you know, shallow depth of field. It's not bad. It looks okay, say on like a smartphone screen, but as soon as you get it a little bit bigger, you spot it right away. So
Oh, my hands are burning.
cool to have in a pinch, but I'd still, yeah, I'd go with a proper mirrorless DSLR camera, or you know, the stabilizer and a good lens. You can't beat a good lens. So, or at least for now, who knows? Maybe the next smartphone will be like some sort of groundbreaking new technology that will render all the mirrorless cameras useless. But so far, I don't think so.
Time for a montage.
Three, two, one.
Let's take this Sennheiser MKE600 for a ride.